Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Chamisa has been boasting about history cannot be rigged. The truth will come out concerning the 2018 and 2023 elections. In his claim, Mnangagwa rigged the elections. And the truth cannot be buried. The truth cannot be buried, he said in his X account. The fullness of time will vindicate us, no matter how many and doomsayers might try to blur the lines of truth and history. Sooner or later, the honest truth about what exactly expired in the last two elections shall come out. You, dear citizens, won emphatically in 2018 and prevailed again in 2023. That which has horns cannot be rubbed, but namanyanga riputirwi. Hashtag the new rise. Hashtag God is in it. I have to say I'm disappointed that he keeps on evoking the name of God over something that has been emerging and is becoming abundantly clear that God is definitely not in it. Chamisa is one individual who wants to have his cake and eat it too. When it comes to elections, the issue has been very clear. Many people, many election reports have come out and say Zimbabwe's electoral process is flawed and is illegal. And credit where credit is due. SADC denied Zanu PF political legitimacy in 2008 and put the regime under pressure to accept the global political agreement, which gave birth to the GNU. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That was at the heart of the GNU. And yet, not even one token reform was implemented. The fault for it is Chamisa and company, the MDC leaders. Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. So they cannot pretend they did not have the chance to implement the reforms. They did. And ever since the GNU, MDC CCC leaders have participated in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating they're giving Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuating the people's suffering. They soldiered on regardless, because they also knew that Zanu PF was giving the opposition a few gravy train seats. That is the issue here. And now for Chamisa to be claiming that the people won the 2018 and then the 2023 elections, which he said the MDC in 2018, MDC alliance had stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And the same message was repeated in 2023, where he claimed Triple C was going to win big because he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. What people cannot accept and should never accept is Chamisa saying the day after the election that Zanu PF is rigged. The very thing that he said would not happen. People had been saying, do not participate in these flawed elections until you implement reforms. And he is the one who has been coming around and saying, no, I've devised ways of winning rigged elections. I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. I've stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Hashtag God is in it. And then the next day after the election, he's the one saying Zanu PF has done the very thing that he said they would not do. He had stopped them doing it. He cannot have it both ways. He cannot have his cake and eat it too. Chamisa should come out right and say what exactly he means. Have you plugged the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections? Because if you have, you cannot be complaining that Zanu PF did the very thing that you said they were not going to do. We are looking at a situation here where since 1999, when the MDC was launched, the MDC, the people have risked everything to elect the MDC into power on the understanding that they would implement the democratic reforms to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. That has been their purpose, their primary purpose. They've not only failed to implement any meaningful reforms, but they've been calling people to participate in flawed elections, telling them lies about how they've stopped Zanu PF rigging the elections. So when Chamisa is boasting about the truth coming out, I think when the truth do finally come out, the people will be amazed. Because the truth, even now, has already started coming out. When Chamisa said he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, people asked, how have you plugged the vote rigging loopholes when we don't even have a verified voters roll? Because without a verified voters roll, Zanu PF has got many ways of rigging the elections. Many ways. Tim Pachelu revealed how some of the people who should be in the voters' roll, their names were not. In other cases, they were in the voters' roll, but they'd been moved from one polling station to another. In some cases, from one polling station in one constituency to another polling station in another constituency. Tim Pachelu also revealed how, in some cases where you've got a house with 2 bedrooms, you find there are 20 voters registered at the same address. How is that possible? That 20 people could live in a 2-bedroom house. This was not the only case. There's since expired that Chamisa failed to deploy some of the election agents at all the polling stations, even when he had been given the funding for it. Here is somebody who claims that he has plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. And then you find he has failed to plug even the obvious vote rigging loophole, for which he was given the funding for it. He pocketed the money. I think when the truth gets to be learned, it will be an eye-opener to many Zimbabweans out there and the world at large. The most important conclusion that will emerge when history is finally told is how much MDCA leaders had become Zanu PF Team B, participating in flawed elections to make sure that Zanu PF wins and has legitimacy for the purposes of getting a few gravy train seats for themselves. One of the other things that will emerge is how slow the people of Zimbabwe have been in waking up to that reality. That MDCA leaders were running with their povo hair whilst hunting with the Zanu PF hounds. There is absolutely no excuse whatsoever why MDCA leaders have failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years of their being on the political stage, including the 5 years in the GNU. And yet, they've done just that. Chamisa has been lying about plugging these vote rigging loopholes, pretending that he and his party would win flawed elections, when he knew that Zanu PF was rigging those elections. There was no way he and his colleagues could possibly win those elections. He was just playing to the gallery, telling people what they want to hear for the purposes of conning them to participate in the flawed elections, whose results he already knew Zanu PF would win, and that by participating, you'll be giving the regime legitimacy. That is the history that is going to come out. That is the history that is already coming out. Chamisa is preparing to call people to participate in 2028 to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the nation's suffering. Why some people fail to see that political reality, even now, 25 years after the formation of MDCA, and not a single reform implemented, beggars belief. That is the reality. That is the history that Zimbabwe's electoral process will reveal. Indeed, the truth is already coming out. Chamisa cannot have his cake and eat it too. He cannot claim that he's stopping Zanu PF rigging the elections until the last day of voting. And the day after voting, he claims that Zanu PF rigged the elections. The very thing that he had been claiming all along, Zanu PF would not do. We need to be aware of it. And we should have been aware of it by now. Think about it.